Welcome to our 9th and final segment of the series of Sound Mind, which focuses on healthy cognitive aging and dementia among older adults. It is sponsored by the Stanford Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. Our focus in this segment is on the family members. It's on family caregiving. It may interest our audience to know that in 2016, approximately 5 million Americans suffered from Alzheimer's disease or another form of dementia. And they were cared for by about 16 million family members or friends who provide, generally speaking, unpaid care to those individuals. And the estimates, according to the recent facts and figures published by the Alzheimer's Association early this year, says that about 18 billion hours of care were provided by these individuals. And if you do the math, that comes out to maybe 1,200 hours of care per person per year, which would clearly bankrupt the country if we had to pay for that care. So caregivers are very important, and that's why we're devoting this segment to that topic. And in this segment, we're going to talk about what caregivers experience, some of the negative and positive impacts, and from a personal perspective, what it's like to be a caregiver. So we are joined by two very important guests tonight. I am your host, Dolores Gallagher Thompson. I'm a psychologist and a research professor at Stanford University School of Medicine. My husband and colleague and research partner for many years is Larry Wolford Thompson. He has studied dementia caregiving for over 20 years and worked clinically with patients and their families. Larry is particularly interested in applying cognitive behavior therapy and principles and techniques to reduce depression in family caregivers. And he's very interested in seeing what can happen with smartphone apps and things like that in this digital age. How can we make more information and services available to caregivers at a reasonable or virtually no cost? And he and I together developed a program called Coping with Caregiving that you're going to hear more about. It's been successfully used in this country as well as in Spain, Australia, and Hong Kong. So I'm sure that he will give you some more details about it later on. And our other guest is Celina Rodriguez. Celina is a journalist and radio personality who has her own radio show. She was born in Mexico and has lived in the Bay Area for 3 decades. She has generously agreed to share with us her personal experiences of caring for her father, who was diagnosed with dementia at the age of 74. But before we turn to our guests, I would like to give some context for this discussion of caregiving. And I'd like to start by saying, what do we mean when we use the term caregiver? So generally, we mean a family member or close friend who provides assistance above and beyond what's typical in a family setting. So this assistance in the beginning might be helping the person remember to take their medications, helping them get to appointments on time, helping them manage their daily affairs. And then as the dementias progress, usually personal care is needed. And because of this, there tends to be a fair amount of stress and strain on the caregiver, particularly as the dementias advance. The other point I'd like to make is, who is the typical caregiver? So for the most part, caregiving is a woman's profession. The majority of caregivers, 2/3, are either daughters or daughters-in-law caring for an aging parent, or wives caring for a disabled spouse. And they are individuals who often have other responsibilities outside the home in addition to what they do for caregiving. So many have young children in the home. They work outside. They may lose time from work because of their caregiving responsibilities. So caregiving is expensive, time-consuming, and takes its toll. So with that backdrop, I hope that we can turn to Dr. Thompson and ask him to tell us about what do we know of the impact of caregiving on the family caregiver.
Well, caregiving, as you point out, is an extremely stressful situation, and it results in a number of symptoms that people have that can be categorized very easily or roughly into physiological and psychological symptoms. And in the physiological, you see problems with the compromised immune function. You see tremendous variations or oscillations in blood pressure and the cardiovascular system. And hormonally, you see tremendous disruptions in the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which results in too much cortisol being into the system, and it's not going through its usual diurnal variation as it should. And these types of physiological changes make the individual very susceptible to catch serious diseases and also to see disruptions in their functioning in ways that major disorders can occur if they do not get appropriate attention.
So physically, some caregivers may become actually ill or more prone to different kinds of illnesses.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
And then on the psychological picture, we have depression is a very important feature here. And on the heels of depression, you have anxiety. People are having trouble knowing what's going to happen and will I be able to cope with it. And then clearly frustration and anger comes into the picture when things don't go right and things are messing up. And then that's usually followed often by a certain amount of guilt about what's going on, and particularly if the caregiver gets angry with their loved one, and then they feel guilty about that or things that they didn't do. So there are those factors that are very negative and cause a lot of dysfunction as well.
Well, is it all negative though? Has the research shown anything else in the picture for many caregivers?
Well, no, that's a good question. Many caregivers actually use the positive to help them deal with caregiving. They get a lot of a sense of giving back to the individual. You hear things like, he helped me so much in my life, now it's my turn, that sort of thing. So it's very rewarding and meaningful to them to be able to give and help an individual like this. And they develop a certain amount of gratitude and thankfulness as they have these kinds of thoughts, which we know is very, very helpful in warding off or counteracting a lot of the negative ideas and feelings that they have.
So it sounds like caregiving is kind of a complex picture. You have the positives, you have some of the negatives. So does this change over time? Like in the beginning, is it different than it is later on, the longer you've been a caregiver?
It does change over time. And usually in the early stages, there's a wonderment, a questioning, what's going on here, and there's a lot of tension about that, and the people are afraid. And then the care increases in terms of the amount of care needed, and then they begin to see that this is kind of hopeless and it's not going to work out, and they get depressed, more and more depressed. Because of the tremendous work and the fact that they're seeing their loved one just disappear right in front of them, and there's nothing they can do about it. And then later on in the process, when the self really begins to disappear from the body, there is a kind of an acceptance of what's going on in a way that they can deal with it in a slightly different way. And also the care is much less as the individual gets older, because they're less agitated, they sit more, they sleep more, they don't require a lot of the supervision that they did early on. So there are general changes across the course of caregiving.
So I would imagine then that caregivers go through many ups and downs in
Yes.
their experiences.
Yes, you're very right about that.
Yeah. So I think that it would be really good now to hear from Celina, who will share with us her personal experiences. Would you agree that caregiving has many ups and downs?
You know, as Dr. Thompson was describing all the different stages of this situation, it remembered me, all the struggles that we went through in our family. My dad, he was a very brilliant man, a forest engineer. He got twice the National Forestry Award in Mexico. So we were used to this very bright man, very active, very independent. And as we started noticing that he had some problems, some trouble speaking and not coordinating the language very well as he used to, he was a very eloquent man. We said, what's going on? And I remember one time my mom shared, you know, Celine, I don't know what's going on, but we're having so many arguments. I don't understand. And he was starting to go through these different stages and changes in his personality. So it was emotionally draining, devastating to see how he was going down the ladder. And there was nothing we could do, and especially for my mom, she just consumed herself. She started to have emphysema that she didn't care about, and if you look at her pictures right after our dad passed away, she aged so much, you know, so it was emotionally draining, physically draining. Sometimes he will get up at night, he wanted to wander around. A couple of times he wanted to walk away from the apartment where they used to live in Mexico City. Thank God there were these people at the entrance that said, where are you going? What do you need? And they call up my mom. So it's devastating, emotionally and physically devastating.
What would you say were some of the most challenging things that you had to deal with as the daughter?
Not trying to show him support for him, trying to support him, trying to let him know that everything was going to be okay, that we loved him no matter what. He was our dad. He was our best dad, no matter what. And trying to control the feelings, especially we didn't have that much information at the time. There was no, or if there was, we didn't know that there was an Alzheimer's association like there is here. So all the resources, all the support groups that you can call to or call in for help, we didn't have that. The doctor mentioned a book, When the Day Has More Than 36 Hours, that really helped us a lot to more or less understand what was happening, what was coming up. And it described exactly all the different stages that our dad went through. And so that helped us a little bit more to cope with all the emotional stress and the physical stress. But it was very, very, very hard to see, see that.
Yes, it certainly is.
Yes.
How long did it go on?
It went, he was diagnosed with dementia about 4 or 5 years before he passed away. So it was like about 4 years after he retired. He was very active. He said, okay, once I retire, I'm going to learn English, I'm going to travel, your mom and I are going to do this and that. They never did. You know, it's amazing. They never did. So I think this change from being extremely active to almost doing nothing was very hard on him.
So it sounds like some of the negative things that Larry described were things that you experienced. So
definitely, like I said, you just took me by the hand and remind me all the painful stages that our family went through with his dementia.
Yeah. Well, Larry also mentioned the positive aspects. So I'm wondering, were there other things or ways that the family coped that maybe helped you to have a balanced, a little bit more balanced experience? the positive and the negative.
Yeah, I had a chance to be with him for his last 2 weeks more directly because our poor mom was exhausted. She couldn't take it anymore. And at least I felt that I was with him, that I spent more time with him, and we tried to, all the children were together, and we tried to let him know that everything was fine, that our mom won't be left alone, that we were there for her. So those kind of feelings really help us a lot. And hopefully it helped him to leave this world
Yes.
in a better, better mode. And
I'm sure that that he experienced that emotional support. You know, people even with advanced Alzheimer's really pick up on emotions.
yes.
They may not understand exactly what's being said or know how to respond, but they feel.
They're like little kids.
Yeah, yeah. So, so thank you for sharing and for giving us a lot of personal feelings about what you went through. 'Cause I know it's difficult, even though it's happened, you know, a few years back, but it's still difficult to discuss.
I think it's just very briefly, it's very important that people look for help. There are many resources here, support groups by the Alzheimer's Association, by Stanford University.
Right.
So I really encourage them to seek for help, look for help.
And actually, that's what I would like Larry to focus on next, because I'd like you to help our audience understand what kinds of help are out there. You know, what do we have available here in the Bay Area, resource-rich communities here? What can people do if they're in this trajectory, they're going down this path? What kinds of help can they look for?
Well, like Celina pointed out, there's a wealth of resources in this area and that offer a number of different kinds of services. We could start with support groups. They are very common, probably the most common kind of service that's offered. And the Alzheimer's Association has a very highly organized program in that regard. And people can call the Alzheimer's Association and find out where support groups are being held and how often they're being held, and that sort of thing, to see if they can pair up with one. And the Alzheimer's Association, some of the chapters also offer a program called Savvy Caregiver, which focuses on helping caregivers develop the kind of skills they need to do the kinds of things that they need to do to make sure that things go well in the care of their loved one. And so that's another thing offered. In our work for many years, we worked with the Coping with Depression program that started out about 20 years ago, and over the course of that time, in doing research with it, we pared it down or abbreviated to a point where it's now a much shorter program, intervention program we call ACEs. And this program is available for people who might be interested in it. And one nice thing about this program that it does highlight the importance of what we call resilience in terms of how that functions to help individuals develop the right kind of coping habits to deal with all the stresses that come up. And then there's respite programs that are offered in the community. And many of these programs you can hear about from all the different senior centers in the area, and those kinds of programs. So they are readily available. And then we also, if you have more interest in these types of things, there is the Rosalind Carter Institute of Caregiving in East Georgia. They have recorded evidence-based interventions all over the country, so that people could look into those as well.
Yeah, thank you. That's quite a list. What I would like for either of you, if you could help our audience understand what is meant by respite. When we talk about a respite program, what are we really talking about?
Well, that's
No, go ahead.
That's a very good question. I should have elaborated on that a little bit. It's essentially a type of program that can vary in terms of what it offers, but it provides an opportunity for the primary caregiver to be laid off for a while, and somebody else is taking the care for a while, so that they can have some free time to take care of their personal needs and do some things for themselves, so that they can regenerate, get refurbished, and go back into the big fight again, feeling a lot better. And it's there are programs where you can get respite for a half a day or a whole week. It depends on what it is that you really need.
Even the Alzheimer's Association offers that resource for the caregivers, and they can go out, let's say on Thursday afternoon. They know they got Thursday afternoon off, so they can get together with a friend, they can go out shopping, whatever makes them feel better. The thing is that to get them out of that stressful situation, and that really helps them.
Yeah. And I'm wondering too, I've heard about adult daycare programs and daycare centers. I wonder if either of you could help our audience understand, what does that mean, an adult daycare program, and when might you want to use a program like that?
Go ahead, doctor, after you.
Well, actually adult daycare programs do offer, in a sense, a form of respite. What a caregiver can do is make arrangements to bring their loved one to an adult day program where they are active in programs there at the adult day center, and they're under supervision for the day, and the caregiver can leave the person there and then go take care of other errands and things they need to do, either for themselves or for the care recipient. They can go get medications. They can see their doctor if they need to. They can do all kinds of things that are important.
Ideally, to take the time off, and I think it's very important the support from other members of the family. You mentioned that most of the time, women are the ones who are taking care of the person. But it's very, very important to know that we need the support of the other members of the family. They can run errands, they can go and get the medication, so this person can really take some time off completely and get more energy to go back to the very, very stressful situation. Emotionally and physically is extremely demanding. So I think it's important that other members of the family come on board. I know it's painful for them, and it's interesting to see how each member reacts in a different way. You know, for us, our Tita, our oldest sister, it was so hard for her to see our dad in such a bad shape, but she will take care of some administrative stuff. You know, we will call our brothers, help us moving our dad on the bed, even though he had some nurses, assistants at the end, because it was so heavy to carry him. You know, so, but this is a family issue that shouldn't be left to just one person.
I'm very glad that you brought that up, that it is a family issue. I think in the research that's been done primarily has focused on one caregiver, that's often referred to as the primary caregiver, and it's assumed that that individual takes on most of the work. And most of the research, well, virtually no research, I should say, has been done really looking at the whole family, the family as a unit. You know, how has the family been affected, and what are some ways to bring the family together, to help them work together as a unit, you know, to provide support to that primary caregiver, but also to have their own role so that they feel, you know, after the person passes, they can look back on it and say that they did their part as well. You know, it's important. So in terms of a future direction for caregiving research, I think that's one area that we need to develop, is how to really assess the impact on the entire family. Because children are affected too, you know, when they see a grandparent who that they maybe used to read to them or do things with them, and then they no longer can, and they get frightened what is happening to grandpa, you know, or grandma, and oftentimes the parents don't really tell them, you know, they kind of shield And so there's a lot of unknown effects on family members.
Yeah, but it will be very healthy for them to also be part of that, to understand, to explain them in a very simple language what is happening to grandpa, mostly, no? Why he cannot play with you anymore. Sometimes there are arguments among the members of the family because of the stress and the pain that we are experiencing with our loved one. It's so hard to deal. We all deal with our emotions in different ways.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, Larry, I'm wondering, is there any area for future research that you would like to suggest that the field take up?
Well, there's an awful lot going on in a number of areas. With regard to caregiving itself, I think Celina and you both have emphasized the importance of getting the family involved and learning more about how they can contribute. There's also room to work psychologically with individuals using some of the techniques we use in cognitive behavioral therapy to help them learn how to deal more effectively with the one they're taking care of, and also deal with their own feelings and their own behaviors. And we have done some of that work on an individual basis and on a group basis, and it's really quite effective. People can, in fact, learn how to deal with these kinds of problems. They can become resilient in a sense, and we're very pleased with that.
Well, thank you both. I think that's probably a good place to end right now. I really appreciate and want to express our gratitude to both of you for sharing your time and your expertise.
Anytime. Thank you.
And unfortunately, our segment is coming to a close, so I would like to end by inviting our audience to seriously consider volunteering for the Stanford Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. We need volunteers because we need a number of people to participate so we can answer these complex questions. What are the causes of Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia? And most importantly, how can they be treated? So at our center, we're seeking people with mild cognitive impairment, early stage Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, or Lewy body dementia. And if you call the number that is on the screen, you will be able to get your questions answered. Maybe you will decide that you will volunteer, which would involve a longitudinal process. So you would have comprehensive examinations annually for as long as you wish to participate. And our center is unique because in addition to having this kind of evaluation and workup for the person involved, we also offer companion services for the family caregivers. So we hope that you will call, and we hope to see you in the future. Thank you.